This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Value prop, people. Value prop. You've heard it. What's your value prop? What's my value prop? I'm not sure about my value prop. Well, you're in for a treat. I have the value prop man, the OG value prop in the house, my friend, Jose Palomino.
Hey, David, the OG. I love it.
OG, baby. You got it. I mean, valueprop.com. People go there. Boom. There it is. You and I have been friends for like 13, 14 years. And I don't think I ever asked you this question. How did you get the domain? How did you get that category killer domain? When did you get it? How did you get it? What was the original business when you started it? And give us the whole story behind that.
Oh, that's a great story. It's a fun story. So I started out, I was actually completing my MBA work at Villanova. And I also decided to write a book about go-to-market, right? All the different pieces of go-to-market. And it became a very big book because it represented, at that point, 20 plus years experience, everything I had done. So I wrote this book, had a lot of things that really were the methodological approaches I've always used working with clients in terms of helping them really figure it out, especially smaller owner-led companies, because there's a lot written for how, if you're Colgate-Palmolive, if you're Microsoft, how you can do marketing. And that's great if you have a couple of billion lying around. But, if you're like an owner-led business and your company is 5 million or $500,000, you don't have $1 billion lying around. So I wrote a book and a process that reflects what we do with clients, and it became pretty big. And I gave it to a pretty senior level person who I respected a great deal. I said, hey, could you read this for me and give me, just take your time and tell me any comments or anything, because I really want to make it super good. And he said, well, what part of the book would you like me to read? Because he did not want to read the big spiral-bound manuscript I gave him. And it clicked. I said, wow, he's more interested in a sliver of this. And the sliver was around value propositions and really getting to the true truth of what your business offers your best customers. So that got split out, and that became the book that was about value proposition. I said, well, it'd be really good. And I came from the IT world where for a long time, it's popular now, but people say, what's your value prop? That was like the thing, right? So I said, value prop. So I started looking up domains, and sure enough, it was parked somewhere. I said, what am I going to do? Because I would really like that name. It'd be great. An 8-letter name that you can actually pronounce on the internet, as you observed. So I reached out through one of these like domain services that does it anonymously. You don't tell somebody, I wrote the book Value Prop, I'd like to buy your domain. How much? Because that although I've seen people do exactly that. So anyway, they came back with some crazy number, like that just was, I said, I can't do that. So I counter proposed. We went back and forth, back and forth. Finally, my phone vibrates because a new message. I was heading off to church actually that morning. I pulled over and they had counted $500. And I pressed accept. Done. So I got value prop and nobody was using it. I got it for $500. And then I actually renamed the company around it. The book got published around it. And it really is an anchor thought. It's not certainly the whole breadth and depth of what we do, but it's really where we start. Like we have to start with that. So that's my story. So it started with the book, and it turned out to be a bid for a name.
And apparently, because it was apparently a Sunday and God was on your side, said, you know what? Jose needs this for $500.
That's right. That's
it. Well, let's talk about this. I love the book. I love all of your ideas. And I think you're right about the foundational piece. The way that companies, especially kind of fast growth, small companies, the way that they talk about what they do, the first 10 words out of their mouth, the first 10 words on their website, the first 10 words or 15 words on their LinkedIn profile, that professional headline piece, that messaging is so vitally important, and it sets you apart either as the go-to company or as a commodity, either as a high fee, high value provider or as a cheap vendor, totally commoditized, totally interchangeable with other companies that do what you do. And I know that you've spent a lot of amazing time and energy and creativity decommoditizing companies through their messaging, through their value proposition. Let's talk about this term messaging. We hear this a lot. Everyone's like, oh, you got to work on your messaging and your messaging isn't clear. And oh my God, your messaging is a disaster. And we're going to come in and fix your messaging. Number one, just like Denzel Washington says, tell it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. What is messaging? And then why is it so important as one of the foundational pieces of our value prop?
That's a fantastic question, David. And I have to answer it in two parts. And I'll talk to you like the proverbial 5-year-old, right? How do we communicate that? Well, one is this, is messaging is completely irrelevant. It's unnecessary and it is worthless if the true truth of your business isn't right. So what often happens is you get branding people come in, they bring in the branding expert, you bring in a messaging expert. They try to spin great words. So you end up with these statements, these declarations, like you said, on LinkedIn, on your website, on your letterhead, on your brochures. You train your people on what to say and how to say it. But no one's paused, or often they don't pause long enough to say, oh, wait a second. What is the truth? Like just in plain language, without trying to be fancy, without trying to get it down to 10 pithy words. If it takes us a paragraph, it takes us a paragraph. But how do we explain what we do and why it matters? And really challenge yourself to ask those questions before you try to refine them into catchy words. In other words, you can't win by copywriting, not in the world of like B2B. If you're selling like an industrial categories, you're actually selling a software platform, you're selling technology, you're selling an industrial service. And I think this is true even in B2C, but especially in B2B categories where it's what would be called a considered purchase. Even if you're selling to an owner who in theory has the checkbook, a good owner in a few $1 million business, if you're selling to them, they're going to involve their CFO, their COO, they're going to involve other people, they're going to involve their husband or their wife, they're going to involve other people to considered purchase. So you have to start your messaging with truth. What do we do that's valuable? That's step one, it's valuable. That you could still be a commodity, still be valuable, right? You sell bananas, other people sell bananas. That's fine. So start with value. That's important. If it's not valuable, it doesn't matter how different it is. It's a lot of things that are different. Every now and then you see these gizmo phones that come out that are really quirky, and they have the ones that open up, but it's like you're carrying a brick in your back pocket. And so they're not there yet, right? The point is, it could be different is not valuable, not intrinsically. Valuable is valuable. Then valuable in a different way, that's differentiation. That's what we call differentiation that matters, right? So if it's just different, it could just be weird, right? Our consultants only come out to your site wearing Bermuda shorts. No one else does that. That's pretty different, okay? But it's not that valuable, okay? So you have to make sure you're really aimed at value first, and values in the eye of the beholder, your customer. What do they see valuable? And then you look at your kind of the competitors and alternatives of what else people are considering to say, what do we do that we deliver that value in a way that's meaningfully different, that actually the difference itself adds additional value, right? So you start with basic value and additional value. Now, put that on a chalkboard and you can actually start thinking about how to get your messaging. So to the 5-year-old, the answer is, it is the words, the symbols, the ideas that you want to communicate to people considering doing business with you in a way that they can understand what's in it for them. Not big, bold declarations, we're number one, we're the biggest, we're the bold. Now, some of those things matter to customers, but like, what's the outcome? And ultimately, I like messaging to lean on what comes out of it. But I also want to say, and I have a caution here, Dave, if you don't mind me just expanding on this a little bit. So sometimes messaging gets very outcome focused, right? So for example, somebody's selling, let's say sales training, for example, or sales training software or software for salespeople. Doesn't matter. It's something about sales. And they say, well, I want to be outcome focused. So you're not buying sales training. You're not buying sales software from me. What you're really buying is increased sales that you can count on year over year, something like that. That sounds pretty good. The problem is, in a world of 1 billion messages coming at us all day, I'm looking at that message, increased sales reliably year over year. What are you? Like, I don't understand the category. You still have to anchor yourself into a category through training, through software. Our software will increase your sales. You have to connect the category. So I see a lot of messaging now coming out that just because everybody bought into like, it has to be outcome based. They have to show the ROI. We have to point to the benefit. Yes, of course. But people cognitively, there's like a tension in your brain when you're looking at that statement saying, but what is it? And you don't know what it is. And that makes you want to go to the next page. Because frankly, nothing's worth investing that much, brain energy to figure out what your message is. So you want to connect the dots and say what you are, right? We are a consulting firm. We are a training firm that helps you do this, especially in B2B categories. I like that anchoring. And I know it doesn't sound as sexy, but it actually helps a buyer say, oh, I get it. I understand what they are. I think I do. And this is the benefit they promise. That connection is very powerful, especially in B2B, not exclusively in B2B, but especially in B2B, because it removes questions and risk out of the picture. If it's just promising me this result, do you do this with a magic wand? And I know there are people, marketers, that would say, well, yeah, what does it matter to you how I do it? I do it with incantations. What's it to you? All right. And I think, well, do people really buy that way? Do they really want somebody coming and doing incantations and spreading garlic powder around my office? I don't think so. So, I guess the argument would be, and if you can prove tangibly with case studies that it works, I guess you'd have some people eventually settling for the smell of garlic in their office. But by and large, most people, especially smart people who've been buying in categories for a long time, for example, at the end of the day, Tesla, and actually Elon Musk was very smart with the S series car, right? The real flagship of their offering. It's a hot sports car. Like, it looks like a hot sports car. It performs like a hot sports car. It's like the car of the future when you sit in it. It's the car Apple would made. In King of Prussia Mall, it's the Tesla store is right next to the Apple store. It's not an accident, right? It's the same thought. But it's a car. It's not a personal transportation device or some other it's in the category of cars. Now, in that, it's a car that doesn't use gas. It's a car with advanced electronics. It's a car with superior performance. It's a car with superior styling. That's in their messaging, but it's still a car.
Right.
And often people who sell services, I don't want to be a consultant. I don't want to be a trainer. I don't want to be a coach. I want to be something else. I'm a catalytic agent for change or something like that. And I'm thinking, like, as a buyer, I don't know what a catalytic agent for change is.
I'm moving on. I'm going on to the next guy who goes, we're a consulting firm and we specialize in, and then it's like, okay, this is what I want.
At some point, things have to make sense.
Right.
So messaging has to be coherent. It shouldn't strain people's brains to figure out what the heck you do. That's the point.
Right. Clear over clever, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show.
Now, I know that you love sales and you're a dyed-in-the-wool sales guy. You've got the shoe leather on the street to prove it, and everything that you do with value prop and with messaging pretty much draws a straight line to sales. So let's talk about the entrepreneurial business owner, CEO, founder who is really concerned about growing the business, growing sales, growing revenue, growing profit. Now, they're already doing okay, right? They're already at whatever, million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million. What are some diagnostic questions that you would show up and you would ask a series of questions that would surface, you know what? I think you may have a messaging problem or a messaging disconnect. Is it about downward price pressure? Is it about not getting the right kinds of meetings? Is it about what are the symptoms of messaging that is missing the mark for that mid-sized growing company?
Well, you've hit on several of them that actually would be in that. But I think one of like the acid test certainly would like to know where they're going margin-wise. What's the margin direction in their offering? If you have a differentiated offering, something that really stands out in the marketplace, that's going to reflect in margin one way or the other. Like if it's not differentiated, if you're commodity-like, that means your biggest customers are actually pressing you year over year to get further concessions. They're always squeezing you on price, and you always feel somewhat insecure about that business. You never feel like it's really your business. And you suspect it's just because you've met their price, maybe the delivery requirements. Certainly, technically, you've given them what they've asked for. They wouldn't be buying from you. But margin is a real tell. And margin in your biggest accounts, your most important accounts, that's really the one tell. The other is describe your ideal customer to me. If you do not have a clear picture, it doesn't mean you don't sell to quite a number of different industries, quite a number of different buyers. I mean, if you're in business long enough, you're going to deal with different people for different reasons. But if you think about it this way, I say, tell me the customer or the 2 or 3 customers you would clone if you could. And then look at your messaging and say, is this messaging really aligned with their interests, what they want to accomplish? Because that messaging could be 50 years old, could be 20 years old. And it turns out you used to sell to steel mills, but there aren't any steel mills anymore. So now you started fabricating product and you sell directly to people that use that product, for example, in manufacturing or something. But you haven't changed your messaging. You're still saying things like trite things like, trustworthy, on time, reliable. I tell people, your competitors don't have on that circle seal, untrustworthy, unreliable. That's not who you're competing against. They all
How about late slackers?
Late that's exactly slackers. Right. Nobody says that. So I think one of the diagnostics is margin. The other is, and it's almost always a really hard question. I say, there's a handy whiteboard right in front of us. Could you just describe to me, I'll even do the whiteboarding, just call out to me what your sales process is? Because sales process is where you inject messaging in terms of this is where we give them something to read. This is how they learn about us. This is when we get engaged in a conversation. This is what we want to focus on.
Yeah.
Messaging is all about trying to bring people to that truth that, again, is battle tested because you've developed that truth by learning what your customers really want. And it also means it's somewhat fluid because the needs of your customers may change. The outcomes they're looking for might change. And that's the other very important tell is when's the last time you revisited your value prop, your strategic statements of intent, the actual words on your website? Well, we did a brand new website. When was that? 2012. Well, it's not brand new anymore, but it's responsive. We updated it to responsive. I said, good. I'm glad you did that, but you haven't really thought about it. You're not talking to your customers enough about this.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go back for a second because you said something really profound that I think it's worth going back to with this messaging thing. I'm going to summarize it with the old cliche that you can't put lipstick on a pig, that the truth of what your business does, the truth of what your business is, and the truth of what your business means to a prospect, that's where the messaging really starts. So sometimes the messaging or the lack of strong messaging is going to drive you in a consulting engagement to go back to the actual truth of what the business is and what it does and how it operates. Give us a couple of examples, if you have them handy, of what were some changes that when you looked at one of your clients' messaging problems, you said, you know what, there really is nothing special here. So we have to build something special or different or more valuable into your offering that will truly set you apart from your competitors. And then what were some of those changes that they made to reinforce their messaging and their position in their competitive market?
2 examples immediately come to mind that are actually very exciting. So one was a company that does a lot of what's a real commodity these days, which is graphic design and printing services. So we really started looking at their client base and saying, well, who are you dealing mostly with? And as we zeroed in on it, it turned out that probably a very substantial percentage of their business was in the pharmaceutical healthcare space, working mostly through agencies that actually were the agency of record, right? Because those are big firms, but that need to outsource the production of whether it's a PowerPoint presentation, a giant scientific poster, something like that. So we said, well, is that really something we're good at? And so, oh yeah, we're better than anybody at that. And I said, well, I don't see that anywhere. So why don't we do this? Why don't we say that that's your specialty? Like just declaring that's what you do. They understood the category that you were graphic design, full service graphic design firm, focus on healthcare and the health sciences. Well, that immediately aligned them with everybody in that space. They became the go-to player and actually saw some significant growth year over year, even through hard times, as a result of that one adjustment, which is finding the true truth that they already had and actually just telling people about it, like just saying this is so. Another example, probably one of my all-time favorite examples, is a company that delivered a true commodity. Talk about commodity. There's nothing more commodity than heating oil. Heating oil into your house is a global commodity. It's actually called heating oil number 2. That's the grade that goes into people's homes. And homes are converting from oil to gas, and all new homes are built with gas in mind, never with heating oil. So as a macro market, it's shrinking. Well, this client was actually pretty big in delivering oil, but they understood things were shrinking. So they needed to buy time and to improve things. So of course I probed on all the things. Is your oil any different? Is, what can be different about delivery and so on? He said, no, pretty much they're all the same. All the companies do the same thing. And what they do, and their best customers are people who sign up for what's called automatic delivery, where you tell the oil company, when you think I need more oil, just come and fill the tank. 285-gallon tank at about $4 or $5 a gallon, depending on the time of year and the year. And I said, well, how do you do that? Do you have like radios and internet connection? He said, no. We have an algorithm based on usage and weather. Everybody in the industry uses it, and it predicts when they're going to need more oil. I said, that's interesting. I said, but so how are you doing? He said, well, we found that we had a lot of overtime hours that were being generated by the fact that we would miss. Like sometimes people call us, we ran out of oil and it's winter. So we actually went to a university and they commissioned an improved algorithm to eliminate overtime hours. I said, really? How good is that? And he said, well, last year we did 60,000 deliveries. I said, how many did you miss? He said, 9. 9 over 60,000. That's nearly Six Sigma quality. I said, how about your competitors? He said, oh, well, they're maybe 98, 97%. We're 99.999. I said, great. So here's what we're going to do. Let's tell the world that we have this capability, because nobody knows. You did it for internal purposes. It was a strength you already had. And we turned it into others make promises, we make guarantees. And we said, if we let you run out of oil, we'll fill the tank for free. 285 gallons at $4 or $5 a gallon. That's a real benefit to homeowner. So what happened? It attracted the higher end homes who wanted the higher level of service. All right. They enjoy roughly 50% greater margins per gallon than any of their competitors in a declining market, which enabled them to do other things in terms of expanding into other markets, other services, and so on. So it's a great story of taking a truth about the business that was operational. Seems like, oh, that's just operational. That's blocking and tackling. Who cares about that? It turned out it was a great customer value, and we had to turn it into something pithy. So the messaging was around that we guarantee it. Because the reality is in a lot of services, people say, yeah, we'll do our best. For sure. And I say, yeah, but what happens if you don't? Well, they actually put a guarantee with teeth in it. And it absolutely changed the trajectory of that business, of that line of business, made it profitable in a way that it wasn't before. And it bought them a lot of time to do other things in terms of restructuring their business. And a lot of people listening to this right now probably have something they did to solve an internal problem that has an external benefit to the customer if they only told the customer.
Right. Don't keep these things a secret.
They shouldn't be a secret.
Exactly.
Exactly right.
Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar.
Now, let's talk about the whole kind of messaging and value prop process. I know that in your book, you talk about the different use cases, the different frameworks, or the different contexts around how we're going to deploy this messaging from initial contact, like, hi, how are you? My name is David. Hi, how are you? My name is Jose. From initial contact all the way through signed contract and all the negotiating. Oh, I got to talk to the CFO. I got to talk to the CEO. Got to talk to the IT team. Give us a little bit of a flavor. You don't need to go fully in depth into this unless you want to. What are some of those use cases and frameworks of how this messaging, we may need to pick and choose aspects of this messaging to talk to various decision makers and stakeholders?
Yeah, so let me limit my comments to those things that messaging need to be tight for in the sales process. Okay. So there's a lot that has to be done on the lead generation, website, social. You want to get people interested in you. You want them downloading your white paper, your content, whatever, to get interested. Maybe attend your webinar, watch a podcast like this. Those are all things that are attractors to people that say, we're going to talk about this issue or problem that we solve, but we're really going to talk about educating you on that, understanding that more fully. But now we move beyond that and they say, let's have a consult, let's talk about things. And again, if it's a considered purchase, meaning it's not an impulse purchase, it's not something that somebody says, here's my American Express card, put 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 on it. But it's actually, you're selling me a machine for $250,000. Well, that's not going to go on the Amex, not typically. So the conversations you need to have and you need to master, well, there are 5 distinct conversations. One is the business conversation. You need to explain why your company is well aligned with their kind of business, that you've worked with companies like theirs before, that you are committed to companies like theirs. Those are all things that you can have in advance thought through those issues, kind of making the case, the business case. The second is the financial conversation. This is not just a price conversation. It shouldn't be if you're selling a big ticket item. You should be looking at ROI, total cost of ownership, something we call return on not investing. And that's weird to say, what's a Ronnie? No one's ever heard of that, right? You've heard of ROI. What Ronnie is saying, that buyer's thinking, if I don't make this purchase in this category at all and push it off for next year, what else am I going to spend the money on? So sometimes they might say, well, instead of buying the new accounting software, maybe I just add a bookkeeper to my staff. Or maybe I can do that other thing I wanted to do, that trade show, and we'll make do for the meanwhile. Buyers always have alternative uses for the cash that you think is like earmarked for you. Okay, so the reality is they have another plan. And so you have to make sure you understand that and talk about what else would you do if you weren't going to do this, whatever this is, this program, this training, whatever. What else would you do to solve this problem, or how else would you allocate these resources?
A quick funny story about that one. I was doing, because I obviously work with small and solo consulting companies, and I had a conversation with someone, and they said, David, this all sounds great. This all sounds wonderful, but I also have my eye on a new boat. And it was literally David or the new boat.
Oh, the new boat.
I'll tell you, the boat won. True story, the boat won. I call back. I said, Jerry, what is it? Is it going to be marketing or the new boat? He goes, David, I hate to tell you, it's going to be the new boat.
There you go. And that's it. That's a Ronnie conversation. So, you have the business conversation, financial conversation. Then there is, in the middle of this, there is a technical conversation. Like, what are the things that they want out of this purchase? And how are you meeting those things? At some point, you do have to meet requirements. Like, there are things they want to do. Now, in that conversation, you may hit a requirement that you can't supply. Then you have to prioritize that requirement and say, is it really that important? Like, is that the main thing? So, for example, in some cases, like for me, I'm doing most of my delivery via Zoom online. So somebody will say, well, we like people coming in-house, and that's one of our requirements. Well, I'm not saying that's off the table, but I might probe on that and say, is that really necessary? Because there are advantages of breaking down what was the traditional 3-day experience that everybody's burnt out at the end of day 3, and spreading that out over a month in a series of smaller workshops where people can actually get deeper and then they can move on and they feel relieved by that. So that's a technical conversation. It will highlight also if it's a miss. They may have an absolute requirement that you cannot fulfill no matter what, and that they won't move off that point. Why kill yourself chasing that when you can't? Again, do you sell boats, David? Well, the answer is no. Then that's a short conversation at that point. And then we get into the fourth conversation is competitive. Like, do you know what else they're looking at? And by that, I mean, not just somebody who looks and sounds like or offers something that sounds like you, but also often what is the status quo. Like, they may be happy with things the way they are, or they can live with the things the way they are. And so you have to really understand what else are they considering. And if they can tell you more specifically what they're considering instead of using your program, your offering, and so on. So that's a really powerful conversation. And the last conversation is often overlooked, and it's the critical conversation, the risk conversation. If they have not dealt with you before, there's an intrinsic chasm there. Maybe it's a big one, maybe it's a thin one, but there's something they have to cross over where they say, I'm going to start giving this person or this company money, real checks that are really going to clear. for this set of promises, and I've not dealt with these people before. I don't know if they can deliver this before. So I have all these questions. What happens if I'm not happy? What happens if I need support? And that often gets, that's like, oh, here's our brochure on our support policies. Like, no, that's a real big conversation that needs to be dug into. Like, how are we going to make sure you're going to be happy at the end of whatever we're doing together? So business, financial, technical, competitive, and risk, 5 conversations. And here's the beauty of it. You're going to have them all the time, which means you can actually think about in advance what's some good things to say in each of those conversations. They don't have to catch you by surprise. Right. They're going to happen. They're going to come up every time. And over time, you get smarter thinking that way. If you're an owner who does selling for your business, or you actually have sales staff, that process is such a critical way to take your message forward. Because message is not just, here's what I do, do you want it? It's, here's what we do, and this is how we're focused on businesses like you. This is how we meet your requirements. This is why we're better than the alternative. And this is how we make sure you're happy.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So really, the messaging piece is the most, because when we started this conversation, we said, this is sort of foundational. But it's not only the foundational starting line, it sounds like it's also the messaging with these frameworks is the straight line to the finish line. So yes, it's foundational and it's the starting line of what's on your website and what do you say and how do you say it and what do you do in your process and so forth, and speaking the truth about the actual conditions and circumstances and features and benefits of doing business with you. But it goes all the way to, what? We're in. You're hired. We want to work with you. We want to bring you into our company. We're doing business. Let's shake hands. When can we deliver the goods? Let's start making this happen. So the messaging thread, if we were to kind of do a little bright red thread or bright green thread, really, because it's more about the money, the bright green thread throughout the entire marketing process and the entire sales process always comes back to messaging, 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 messaging. Messaging at the beginning, messaging in the middle, and then what we just talked about is messaging to close the sale.
Absolutely. I mean, it's about building consistency and never being caught flat-footed because you didn't think through something that's going to come up every time, that's already come up like 5 times this week in 5 prior conversations.
Totally.
And none of it is about Jedi mind tricks. None of it is about, I'm going to say clever words to distract them. Don't mind the man behind the curtain. No, you, again, anchor yourself on the truth. Think about how you create value for your best target customers. And then messaging just is a way of making sure they understand the opportunities of that truth for them. That's providing a service at every step. When they read your white paper, or they read your blog post, they read your website, they talk to your frontline customer service person, they talk to your account exec, they talk to you. Why wouldn't I want them to understand how I could help them? That's what I want. Now, if they understand how I could help them, and I made that point and it's crystal clear, and they choose to buy the boat instead, I can't help that. But at least I know that I've done everything I can to connect the dots between the value I have available to them, what the outcomes would be for them, and the options they have available to them to choose to work with us or not. I mean, it's really, at that point, I can rest easy. You put your head on the pillow and say, you know what? I'm creating value. The clients who get it, and those who don't, unless it's something I'm not doing right in messaging, which is I gave them the wrong impression. I didn't explain something. They thought that, oh, you mean you don't have any kind of guarantee? Well, I can't take that chance. I've never dealt with you before, and so on. So you're exactly right. I think that green thread runs through edge to edge, and it's always something that's being worked on.
Yeah.
Because customers change, requirements change, your capabilities change. So you can't just say, well, we painted that green stripe, so to speak, through our business 8 years ago. Well, as a CEO, that's something you have to always be thinking about.
Yes. Well, and it's so true because, everything changes, right? The market changes, technology changes, regulatory environment changes, compliance, marketplace trends and shifts and demands and wants and needs and what you're offering, right? Absolutely. New lines of business, new product lines, new service lines are coming online. So I love what you just said. This is something that always needs to be refined and revisited, and once in a while kind of reinvented and rebooted too. what you said in the middle of our interview is also very profound, especially when it comes to, my personal experience. Multiple times in the course of my business, and having seen this, of course, hundreds of times with clients, just like you've seen it hundreds of times with your clients, you go to the website and you say, does this messaging that's on your website right now reflect the current immediate state of the reality of your business right now as it stands? You ask most CEOs, presidents, and owners, they go, sort of, and again, we just redid the website. Okay, yeah, back in 2014. We just added a new page about this. Yeah, that was back in 2017. And it's never in sync. Now, the clients where it is in sync, when you talk to those CEOs and presidents and owners, you can see this alignment. You can see their bodies start to relax, and you go, you know what? We are so excited because our website and all of our material and all of our sales reps and all of our marketing team, we're finally doing what we say and we're saying what we do. And you can feel it in your bones when that happens. And it's a great, great feeling.
Yeah, and I have a lot of empathy for folks where that disconnect takes place between saying what we do and doing what we say. It's just simply, it's the rate of change. And it's hard to do. And unless you have like a real dedicated, like, content specialist, staff, and most smaller firms, less than 50 or $100 million in revenues aren't really going to be able to do that.
Right.
So it is a challenge. However, it's definitely a doable challenge. And it's very important that you always start with where everything begins, your customer. Like, what do they need to understand? What information would be helpful to them to make a better decision? If you think of it that way, say, oh, okay, as opposed to what can I say to make them buy? These days, you're not going to make anybody buy. Not a big considered purchase. Again, an impulse purchase, maybe. But people don't buy big things that way. They pause on it. They think about it. So how can I help them buy as opposed to make them buy? That's the key to messaging that's successful.
Love it. Boom. Stick the landing right there. Now, I know people are listening. They want to get connected and stay connected to more Jose Palomino brilliance. Where can we send people? What are some links? What are some resources that you can share?
Oh, sure. Fantastic. Well, one, certainly they can check us out at valueprop.com. That's VALUEPROP.com. And there's two subpages there that might be of great interest to them. One is we have a series of guides made specifically for owners that cover a lot of these topics, and they're free for download, and they're real thoughtful guides. And that would be valueprop.com/guides, right? GUIDES. And then we also, once a month, we do a demo, kind of a masterclass that explains some of these principles, and also a system that helps you operationalize this, actually do this stuff for real in your business. And that would be valueprop.com/free-demo. It's a free demo, and you sign up, and it's about a 45-minute session. Learn a lot just in terms of some key principles about how revenue flows through your business, especially through this messaging. And then also how, if they're interested in working with us, how they could go about doing that as well.
Totally fantastic. All right. Awesome. Well, so this is all going to be the show notes under this episode at thespeakingshow.com. Jose Palomino, you are awesome. You are amazing. I am privileged and honored to have been your friend for the past 13 or 14 years. That's now over, because you are clearly so much smarter than me, and I really hate you, but that's okay. No, kidding. So fantastic to have you. We have to have you back. We always have our favorite people back on the show for repeat episodes, because clearly you and I can talk about this stuff for days. And we have talked about it for days, by the way. So Jose is one of my trusted advisors. When I have a problem or a situation or a little bit of a sticky predicament, I always tap into your brain, my friend, and there's always brilliance freely forthcoming. So I just hugely appreciate that as well. And great to have you on today. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. My absolute pleasure.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.